And see, we'll be starting off on Chapter 28. Chapter 28. We finally got into Neil's car, driving all the way to Storybrooke. We could all see that Mr. Gold had been hurt badly, but they didn't know how badly it was. My father's hook had poison on it. I hoped it was not Dreamshade, but then again, it could still be, so I was worried. "Emily, is Mr. Gold going to be alright?" Henry asked. "Henry, I don't know." The car went back to silence. We were almost to Maine. About half an hour later, and don't ask how we got there so fast, we made it to the shop. Neil and I picked up Mr. Gold and carried him in. "Emily, what happened?" Belle asked, coming to the front of the shop. "My father stabbed him in the chest with his hook. I am led to believe he had poison on it, the hook, but I can't tell," I replied. Neil and I gently set Mr. Gold down on the bed where I had slept for 3 months. Belle looked at Neil, but didn't question him. She seemed to recognize him from somewhere, but there was no time to question it. Belle rushed over to the hospital, going to look for help. Henry went up to Emily and hugged her around her waist. "Emily, do you know what that poison could have been?" Emma asked. "No, the only poison I know of would be Dreamshade. But that might not be possible, since Gold isn't all the way dead. I have been taken under the effects of soar, and this is nothing like it." "Well, do you think it could have been something from the enchanted forest?" "Either that, or that. Well, that's most likely, because that's where my father was." "I hope that the doctors will be able to fix it," Snow said. She and Charming had just gotten into the room. "Snow, come here," Mr. Gold said from the bed. His voice was weak, which proved he was dying. Snow came up to the side of the bed, and Mr. Gold whispered something to her. She left the room, walking to who knew where. Just then, a purple cloud of smoke appeared. Cora appeared, and she tried to enter the room, but Emma had created a force field. She stood still and seemed to be talking to someone else. "Emily, what is she doing?" Henry asked. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it cannot be good." We waited and waited and waited. At the last second, Mr. Gold gasped. Neil raced over to his side, but Mr. Gold waved him off. He stood up, dropping the rag that had been covering his chest. It had stopped bleeding. "She did it," Mr. Gold whispered under his breath. He thought no one could hear him, but I could. I didn't tell him that, though. Regina rushed around the front of the shop, running up to Cora. She grabbed her, crying. Mr. Gold brought down the force field, and he walked into the room. He walked past Regina and went up to the door. He went outside and walked away. Henry went over to Regina's side and gave her a hug. It was a sad sight, but there was something wrong. "Where is my father?" Chapter 29. "Alright, boys, they will be coming anytime soon. We must be prepared to welcome the Queen and the truest believer. We want the boy to come to us, to trust us, and we want Emily to be welcomed in familiar arms," Peter said. He wanted everything to be perfect for Emily's arrival. "Pan, what about the boy's parents? Won't they come after him?" Felix said. "You fool, of course they will." "That's the fun of the game," Peter said, sounding like a kid in the middle of tag. "Alright, Pam, whatever you say," Felix said. And he left to help the other lost boys. It was going to be a long, hard week. "Pan, aren't you worried about your son? He's going to come after the boy, you know that," the shadow said. "No, he's always been part of the game, and this is where the game peaks." Chapter 30. I ran out onto the street, knowing that Mr. Gold would be safe with my father lurking around. "Captain Hook!" I cried sharply into the air. "Emily!" My father's yell could be heard, but it was very, very faint. I glanced toward the clock tower and saw him at the edge of the clock, which was shattered. "Don't worry, I'm coming!" I rushed to the stairs and saw someone blocking the entrance to the stairwell. "What are you doing here?" the woman asked. "You seem to be holding my father hostage, and don't you recognize your queen?" I asked. This was one of Pan's workers. "Oh, please excuse me, Your Highness. I didn't know it was you. Please, follow me," she said. "This must be the woman Tamara, which Peter had been talking about. That would mean her partner was Greg. I thought Peter would have chosen Alexander, who had been on Neverland for 5 years, not 1. We reached the top, and Greg bowed when he saw me. Your Highness, a pleasure to meet you, Greg said. The same to you. Now release my father, or I will have Peter's shadow take yours, I said, turning my eyes over to him with an icy stare. Yes, ma'am, Greg said, and he began to untie my father's bonds. Tamara gave my father his hook, and he snapped it into place. Thank you, Emily, my father said, and he gave me a hug. You're welcome. But it was nothing. I did this every day back on Neverland, I replied, and we walked back down the stairs. Queen Emily, would you like us to escort you? Greg asked. No, I think that I will be perfectly safe here. Get on with your jobs and don't even think about bothering my father, I said, and they went back inside the clock tower. Emily, since when did you have so much power over people? My father asked. Since I fell in love with Peter. Oh, all right. We walked back towards Snell's house and went in. Hey, I'm home. I have a guest, I called into the house. Emily, what is going on? My father asked. Everyone was huddled up around the bed. I have no clue, but it doesn't look very good. We walked over to the group and saw Snow laying in the bed. Emily, where were you? Emma asked. I was helping my father, I said. Everyone looked over at him but said nothing. Mary Margaret was the one who killed Cora, and she can't shake it off, Emma said, telling us what had happened when I left. Oh, poor Snow. Is there anything I can do to help? I asked. Not that we can tell. Why doesn't everyone get on with their lives? We haven't got too much room in here, and it's starting to get crowded, Charming said, and people began to clear out. The only ones to stay were Emma, Snow, the dwarf, Henry, my father, and myself. Well, what should we do now? Henry asked. I could teach you how to sail Jolly Roger, my father said. Yeah, come on. It will be lots of fun, I said. I glanced at Emma, and she nodded her head yes. We went for the docks, where the Jolly Roger was docked. It looks more amazing than I remember, I said. And it did. The sails were up, the deck was polished, and the wheel was shimmering in the afternoon light. Aye, that it does, my father said. Henry just stood there, speechless. Well, do you want to learn how to drive it or not? I said, and I ran up to the wheel. The wood was smooth and worn down after multiple times of being used. It was just as I remembered. Do you remember how to sail it, Emily? My father asked. Of course I do. I spent most of my life on the decks of this very boat, I replied. I rushed around and did the jobs of the whole crew in half the time that it used to take. Emily, are you sure you want to do this all on your own? We can help. Well then, get to work. I have a ship to sail. And they got to work. My father stood near the sails, and Henry came up to the wheel to learn how to steer. How do you sail such a big boat? Henry asked. Watch and learn, little buddy, I said. And he did, if not too well. When we finally got back to the docks, his eyes were red from staring for too long. So, Henry, did you have fun? Regina asked. She had been waiting at the docks. Yeah, that was so much fun. Can we go again sometime, Emily? Henry said. Sure, as long as Regina and Emma are okay with it. We'll see about that, Regina said. Everyone went home and went to sleep. Chapter 31. About a week later, the worst yet best thing was about to happen. I was going home. Greg and Tamara had caused quite a bit of damage and had gotten their hands on Henry. We were supposed to meet at the docks in 5 minutes. I had to find an excuse. I'm going for a walk on the docks. I'll be back soon, or else come looking for me, I said, hoping that they would believe me. All right, Emily, we'll see you later, Emma said. Make sure to keep an eye out for Henry. He might be out there, Regina said. Don't worry, I will, I replied, and I walked out. The walk to the docks was relaxing, and I couldn't wait to get home. I reached the docks, and Greg and Tamara were waiting with Henry. You ready to go, Queen Emily? Greg asked. I looked at him, my icy stare cutting through him. As long as you have it, let's go, I said. He pulled out what I had been hoping to see for years, a magic bean. Greg handed it to me, and I threw it into the water. Greg went first, Henry gripped in his hand. Tamara went next, then me. When we landed, I was the only one to land standing. I dusted myself off and helped Henry to his feet. Not second now, I whispered. loud enough for only Henry to hear. A shriek came from the air, and we looked up. The shadow was coming at us at full speed. It went straight to Greg and ripped his shadow out, then flew away, causing Greg to collapse to the ground, dead. Tamara was shot with an arrow covered in dream shade. It landed in her thigh, causing her to collapse as well. "Hello there, my boys. Now, where is Peter?" I asked. "Hello, love. Do you have the boy?" Peter asked as he came out of the shadows. "Hello there. I'm Henry," Henry said, shaking against me. "Oh, we already knew that. Don't worry about making any introductions. Now, let's head to camp," Peter said. The lost boys dispersed into the forest, as if they had never even been there. Henry stayed at my side, shaking violently. "Henry, are you all right? Would you like a jacket?" I asked, and I made a jacket appear next to Henry. "No, I'm just a little freaked out. This place is kind of creepy," Henry replied. He was still shaking when he put on the jacket. Peter glanced back at us, wondering what was taking us so long. "Come on, Henry, we just have a little further to go." "You can make it if you believe," I said. I put him on my shoulders and jogged up to Peter. "Well, slowpokes, we're here. Henry, I hope you can make yourself comfortable by the fire," Peter said. He helped me get Henry off of my back, placing him on a stump by the fire. He patted his back and walked towards me. "Let me guess. We're going to the cliff," I said. Peter grinned. It was so nice to see his face again. "You know it. I have something special for you," Peter said. He ran all the way, me chasing after him. When we got to the cliff, we were so out of breath that we couldn't talk for a few seconds. "You've gotten faster," I gasped. "You as well," Peter replied. We glanced at each other, smiles spread across our faces. When we were both breathing normally, we both collapsed into a fit of laughter. We didn't know why, we just did. I can't believe it, we're back where we started, on this cliff, laughing like fools. I didn't think we would be able to do this, or at least not here," I said. "Who said we weren't going to look for a new home?" "Do you think I just gave up? Because if you think that, remember that Peter Pan never fails." "Oh, how could I have forgotten? What a fool I am, forgetting the words that you told me almost every second of my day. Even when I was cursed, I couldn't forget that you said it so many times. Don't you think I noticed? You were practically whispering it in your dreams. I thought I had driven you insane by saying that." "Well, you kind of did, because I always thought I would never fail a single test. But then I would miss every single question. I had it coursing through my head. Sorry, but it is true. You've seen it your whole life, so of course you know." We kept talking, going off the stupid questions, such as why I had cut my hair. It was nice to be back here. "Emily, I think we should take that preservation spell off. It will only keep going, and I might never want to take it off any other time." "Okay, go ahead," I said. I felt the warmth I had felt the past 28 years leave me. At first I thought I was being shoved into the Arctic, and I began to shiver. Peter brought me closer to him so that I would be warm. He then had a blanket appear over us. That stopped the shivers, but also made me feel tired. My eyes began to droop, and I eventually began to sleep. That's the end of chapter 31, and I will see you guys in the next video.